My son Brandon thought he was untouchable, strutting through life like a king on borrowed time, until I made the move that taught him an unforgettable lesson. At 56, I'd raised him alone in Ohio after his father ditched us when he was 6, working 2 jobs, secretary days, diner waitress nights, to keep food on the table and clothes on his back. I sacrificed everything for his steady education, his steady start. But somewhere, my hard work twisted him arrogant, like a vine choking its own tree. He landed a fancy job at a firm, got promoted quick, and instead of thanks, he mocked me. "Mom, you're still scraping by? Time to retire that old hustle," he'd say with a smirk, phone glued to his hand like a crown. He bragged about cutting corners at work, knowing people who could make problems vanish. His eyes gleamed with that invincible glow, like laws bent for him. I let his words slide off me, but my chest burned like coals under ash. That night, after he left without a hug, I decided I wasn't going to let him destroy himself or me any longer. The breaking point had come. Just before you continue to watch, Feminine Revenge would like you to subscribe to this channel and like this video. It would encourage us to keep this streak of thrilling revenge stories for you to watch. Alright, back to the story. It wasn't just arrogance that pushed me over the edge. Brandon stopped visiting unless he wanted money or favors, treating me like an ATM with legs. Last month, he borrowed my savings, $5,000 I'd scraped together for emergencies, calling it for an investment that'll pay big. I handed it over, trusting my only son. But he never paid it back, and when I asked, he shrugged like it was pocket change. "You'll get it soon, Mom, don't stress." I later discovered through a mutual friend he'd blown it on a gambling trip to Atlantic City, laughing it off with buddies over beers. When I confronted him at home, voice shaking, he leaned back on my couch and said, "You'll always bail me out, you're my mom. That's what you do." My hands trembled like leaves in wind, but my mind sharpened like a blade on stone. How had my boy turned so cold? That's when I started keeping notes, evidence, dates, receipts, everything he said or did that showed his rot. No more blind love. I'd build my case quiet as a shadow. One Sunday dinner, as I set the table with roast and potatoes in our small Ohio kitchen, Brandon casually admitted something that froze my blood. He chewed his steak like a king on his throne, knife waving as he bragged, "Mom, you worry too much about rules. At work, I fudge docs all the time, shift numbers here, sign off there. Don't worry, nobody ever catches me. I'm too smart for that." My fork froze midair, hovering over my plate, as his words sank in like poison. He laughed it off, grabbing more bread, clueless to the bomb he'd dropped. But he didn't know I had hit record on the little voice memo app on my phone, tucked under a napkin, capturing every slurred boast. His carelessness had just handed me my first weapon, solid as gold in my pocket. I smiled through the meal, nodding like the doting mom, but inside, resolve hardened. This wasn't just talk, it was proof of crimes that could bury him. But that was only the beginning. I needed more, layers of evidence to build a wall he couldn't climb over. When my grandmother's gold necklace disappeared from my jewelry box one afternoon, I knew exactly where to look. Straight at Brandon. It had been in the family for generations, a simple chain with a heart locket holding her photo, worth more in memories than money. I'd noticed him eyeing it during his last visit, fingers twitching like he calculated its pawn value. Sure enough, a quick online search of local pawn shops showed it listed under his name, photo matching perfect, price cheap like trash. He didn't even try to hide it, his arrogance thinking I'd never check or care. My heart sank deeper than my rage, a cold weight in my chest. I realized my son had no respect left for me, stealing not just cash but pieces of our history like they meant nothing. That necklace wasn't just jewelry, it was family history, the one thing Grams left me before she passed. I swore I'd get it back and use it against him, turning his theft into another nail in his coffin. No more blind eyes. I'd redeem it quietly, adding the receipt to my growing file of his sins. I smiled the next time Brandon stopped by unannounced, acting like nothing had happened between us, like his unpaid loan and gambling tales were just water under the bridge. "Come in, have some pie," I said, slicing him a big piece of apple from the fridge, my voice warm as fresh crust. He plopped on the couch, kicking his feet up, and launched into his inflated stories about work wins and weekend conquests. Inside, I was memorizing every slip of his tongue, my mind sharp as a tack pinning notes. He bragged about insider stock tips from buddies in high places, winking like he owned Wall Street. Then he mentioned a friend in law enforcement who helped him dodge traffic tickets, laughing it off like rules were jokes for suckers. Every word, every brag went into my notebook later that night, dates and details etched clear. He thought I hung on his tails like a proud mom. Really, I collected ammo. But then I overheard something far more dangerous. Him on the phone in my hallway, whispering about fixing a deal at work that sounded illegal as midnight theft. A man called my landline one afternoon while I folded laundry, his voice sharp as a knife edge through the receiver. Is Brandon there? He knows why I'm calling. When I said no and pressed him, who is this? His tone turned threatening, low and gravelly. Tell him he owes $25,000 and the clock's ticking. Payment due yesterday. I nearly dropped the phone, my hands going cold as ice. That wasn't just gambling debt from his Atlantic City trip. It was destruction. A black hole sucking everything in. Heart pounding, I dug through my mail and found statements I'd overlooked. Brandon had been using my name to co-sign loans without my knowledge, forging my signature like it was scribble on a napkin. Thousands racked up in my name, tying me to his mess like chains around my ankles. I realized he wasn't just arrogant, strutting like a peacock with borrowed feathers. He was pulling me down with him, risking my home, my savings, everything I'd scraped together over decades. The rage boiled slow, but clear. If I didn't act, his untouchable act would bury us both. I cried that night after Brandon's visit, not out of weakness like a broken dam, but clarity sharp as a knife's edge cutting through fog. Tears streamed as I paced my small Ohio kitchen, the clock ticking like a countdown to his doom. If I didn't stop him now, life would. Prison bars slamming shut, debt collectors pounding doors, or worse, a grave from his reckless bets. He'd drag me down too. My hard-earned savings as play money, my name forged on loans like a thief's signature. But if I moved too quickly, storming in with accusations, he'd sniff it out like a fox sensing a trap, twisting it back on me as crazy old mom. I needed patience like a hunter in tall grass, precision in every step. Revenge wouldn't just be about punishment, hot and fast. It had to be a lesson, slow burning into his soul, teaching him no one's untouchable, not even a mother's son. Wiping my face, resolve hardened like concrete setting firm. And I knew exactly where to start. His boss, the one man who could yank his ladder away. I reached out to Brandon's assistant, Kara, under the guise of checking in as the proud mom, emailing her for a casual coffee meet at a quiet shop downtown. She agreed, thinking it harmless chit-chat about her great boss. Over lattes, I asked harmless questions at first. How's the team? Any fun projects? Acting like a doting parent with wide eyes and nods. But she let details slip like crumbs from a cookie, her guard down after my warm smiles. Brandon's sharp, but those overtime logs, sometimes they don't add up, she whispered, glancing around. Then more, missing company funds from petty cash, whispers around the office about creative accounting to hit bonuses. My stomach turned like sour milk churning. Brandon wasn't just reckless with words, he was criminal, dipping into pots that weren't his, risking jail for quick cash. The pieces clicked, his boasts, the debts, all tied to this rot. I thanked her sweetly, hiding my shaking hands under the table. I realized my son's entire career was a house of cards, wobbling on lies, ready to tumble with one breath. One day, while cleaning Brandon's old room in my Ohio house, pretending to dust away cobwebs from his teenage mess, I found a crumpled bank statement stuffed in his forgotten backpack under the bed. The paper was worn, like it had been folded and refolded in guilt, but the numbers jumped out clear as day. Transfers from his firm's client account straight into his personal one, thousands moved in sneaky chunks labeled fees that smelled like lies. Clear embezzlement, bold as brass, like he thought no one would ever dig. My hands shook like leaves in a gale as I smoothed it out, heart pounding at the proof of his crimes staring back. This wasn't just a sun slip, it was felony fuel, the kind that could lock him away for years. I tucked it into a folder with my growing pile of evidence, texts, receipts, notes from his boasts, building my case like bricks in a wall. He'd stolen from work, from trust, from everything I'd taught him. But fate gave me an even bigger break that same afternoon, a discovery sharper than any paper cut. Brandon stormed into my house late one night, drunk and furious as a bull in a pen, slamming the door so hard the pictures rattled on the walls. "Those idiots at work think they can watch me?" he shouted, pacing the living room like a caged tiger, his face red as a beet. He ranted about people sniffing around, slamming his fist on the coffee table hard enough to crack the wood. Between slurred words and wild gestures, he admitted it all. "I bribed that city inspector last month, couple grand to look the other way on the permits. Don't worry, Mom. I'll fix it like always." My phone sat recording that in my lap, hidden under the tablecloth I'd casually draped there when he burst in. I nodded along, pretending sympathy with, "Oh, honey," and worried looks, but inside, triumph sparked like a match in dry grass. That audio file became my trump card, his own voice damning him deeper than any witness could. He'd handed me gold on a platter, clueless as ever. I confronted Brandon lightly one evening when he dropped by for dinner, keeping my voice casual as I set plates on the table. "Son, are you in trouble? Those late nights, the calls, tell me if something's wrong." He smirked, leaning back in his chair like a king on his throne, and said, "Mom, you're being paranoid. Nothing touches me. Not the law, not the firm, not even you." The words stung like a slap from my own blood, sharp and cold, cutting deeper than his usual boasts. That arrogance was the final confirmation. I wasn't imagining his spiral into lies and risks. I was living in it, breathing the poison he'd brought home. His eyes gleamed with that untouchable glow, like he floated above consequences, but I saw the cracks, sweat on his brow, fidgeting hands. I nodded, pretending concern, but inside, resolve hardened like ice in winter. No more soft landings, he'd learn hard. "And we didn't support you at first, but now," with his words echoing, I started building my plan for the day I'd pull the trigger, slow and sure. I contacted a lawyer friend, Alicia, whom I hadn't spoken to in years since our book club days, emailing her under the guise of general advice. Without naming Brandon, I asked what evidence would hold up in court for financial crimes. Paper trails, recordings, witnesses? She called back that afternoon, her voice crisp over the line. "Solid stuff. Bank statements, audio admissions, patterns of behavior," she said. "Why? You in trouble." I laughed it off as helping a friend, but my heart pounded like a drum in a quiet room. My folder already had all three, stacked neat as evidence in a trial. The embezzlement slips, the bribe boast on tape, even the forged loan in my name. My plan was no longer fantasy, scribbled notes in the dark. It was real, sharp as a blade ready to cut. But I wanted Brandon to feel the walls close in, slowly, like a noose tightening with each breath he took unaware. Let him strut a bit longer. The drop would hit harder that way. I began dropping subtle hints to test Brandon's nerves, starting small like pebbles in a pond to watch the ripples grow. One evening when he dropped by for takeout, I lied casually over burgers. "Your boss called earlier today, sounded serious, asked if I'd seen you." His face paled like milk gone sour, eyes widening for a split second before he covered it with a forced laugh. "Probably nothing. I'll check tomorrow," he muttered, but his fork shook as he stabbed his fries. A few days later, during a phone call, I mentioned offhand hearing about federal crackdowns on embezzlement cases on the news, how they were nailing folks for fudged books and bribes. He choked on his beer mid-sip, coughing like he'd swallowed glass, his voice tight when he recovered. "Yeah, well, that's for idiots who get caught." My quiet satisfaction was electric, buzzing through me like a live wire. I saw the fear flicker behind his smirk, the untouchable mask cracking just a hair. He had no idea the storm was already brewing, dark clouds gathering from his own thunder. My neighbor, Mrs. Hayes, told me one afternoon over the fence while I weeded my garden that she'd seen sketchy men parked outside my house the night before, idling in a dark sedan for hours like shadows waiting to pounce. They looked rough, kept glancing at your windows, she whispered, her eyes wide with worry. My gut twisted like a wet rag wrung tight. Those had to be debt collectors circling closer, Brandon's gambling holes catching up like a noose tightening. When I asked him about it later that evening, cornering him on a call, he brushed it off with a laugh too quick. Mom, you're imagining things, probably just lost tourists. But his voice hitched, a tell I'd known since he was a kid lying about broken vases. No more delays. If I didn't move soon, those men would do it for me, dragging him, and maybe me, into a mess bloodier than any lesson. And I wasn't going to let strangers teach my son a lesson meant for me, carved from years of my sweat and silence. I mailed copies of Brandon's forged documents to his firm anonymously the next morning, slipping into the post office like a shadow in the dawn light. Not all of them, just enough to raise suspicion. The bank statements with client funds siphoned to his account, the loan apps with my name scrawled in his hand. I used a plain envelope, no return address, stamped and sealed with care. Within a week, whispers spread through his office like smoke from a hidden fire. An internal audit was coming, sudden and sharp as a knife twist. Colleagues buzzed in hallways, eyes darting, while Brandon shrugged it off at first, boasting to me over the phone about overreacting bosses. But I saw the crack in his voice, the way his laugh hitched like a skipped record. He had no clue I was the spark behind it, the quiet hand lighting the fuse under his feet. Watching his smug confidence begin to crack was delicious, sweeter than any revenge I'd imagined, slow, savory, like biting into forbidden fruit while he remained blind to the poison. Brandon burst through my door that evening, red-faced as a boiled tomato, shouting about rats, in the office like a man hunted by ghosts. Someone's leaking stuff, docs, emails, everything, he yelled, pacing my living room floorboards until they creaked under his stomps. He accused everyone, his boss for jealousy, co-workers for backstabbing, even the janitor for snooping, except me, his doting mom sitting quiet on the couch. I sipped my tea slow, steam curling up like secrets in the air, while he spiraled deeper, fists clenched white. I'll find the leak and bury them, watch me, he promised, eyes wild with that untouchable fire flickering dim. My heart thudded like a drum in a storm, but I didn't flinch, didn't let a tremor show in my cup. He ranted on, clueless, storming out with a slam that rattled the windows. He had no idea the real leak lived under his roof, brewing tea and building his downfall sip by careful sip. The audit dug deeper into Brandon's firm like a shovel hitting bone, uncovering layers of his lies that stank like rotten fruit. He grew erratic as the pressure built, pacing my living room during his frantic visits, his eyes wild and red-rimmed from too many late nights dodging calls. He'd drink more than talk, emptying my beer stash while muttering about snitches and bad luck, his hands shaking like leaves in a gale. Calling in sick became his routine, faking coughs over the phone to his boss, but I knew the truth. He was unraveling, the untouchable sun looking more like a cornered animal ready to snap. His golden glow faded to a sickly pallor, arrogance cracking under the weight of whispers at work. I almost pitied him, watching him slump on my couch like the boy I'd raised, lost in his own mess. Almost, remembering the forged loans, the stolen savings, the way he'd shrugged off my life like pocket lint. But pity vanished when he made his biggest mistake yet, one that sealed the trap I'd laid so carefully. I got a letter in the mail one crisp afternoon, the envelope plain white but heavy with doom as I slid it open at my kitchen table. Inside, a bank notice glared back. Another loan approved for $15,000, my signature scrawled at the bottom in Brandon's sloppy hand, forged like a thief's mark on stolen goods. My blood ran cold as winter frost, hands going numb as I stared at the paper. He'd done it again, dragging my name through his mud without a thought, tying me to his sinking ship. This wasn't just burning bridges. He was pulling me into the fire with him, risking my home, my scraps of retirement, everything I'd bled for over decades of double shifts. The rage boiled up slow but fierce. a pot ready to spill over. That was the nail in the coffin, hammering shut any leftover mercy in my heart. I knew exactly when to strike, soon, when his guard was lowest, my evidence like a loaded gun pointed at his untouchable crown. No more waiting, his downfall started now. I cleaned my house that evening like a woman preparing for war, scrubbing counters until they gleamed, the scent of lemon sharp in the air. Dust bunnies vanished under my broom. Old mail shredded like forgotten secrets. Then I cooked his favorite stew, beef simmering slow in a pot with carrots and potatoes, the aroma filling every corner like a warm trap. I texted him, "Come over for dinner? Miss our talks." He showed up an hour later, tie loose, that untouchable smirk still plastered on. "Smells good, Mom. Peace offering?" he joked, hugging me quick like nothing weighed between us. I smiled back, genuine as poison honey, and listened as he sprawled on the couch, spinning lies about handling everything at work, his debts under control, his schemes foolproof. My chest swelled, not with pride like the old days, but with the knowledge this would be his last free meal under my roof, his last night thinking he owned the world. He ate seconds, clueless, while I sipped water, heart steady as a ticking bomb. Tomorrow, his empire would crumble, and I'd light the fuse myself. At dawn, before the sun cracked the horizon, I delivered my evidence package to his firm's legal department, slipping it into their after-hours Dropbox like a ghost in the shadows. Every recording of his boasts, every receipt from his gambling sprees, every forged loan paper neatly organized in folders labeled clear as day. My hands shook as I drove next to the IRS tip line office, mailing another copy with anonymous stamps, the envelope heavy like judgment in my palm. But my resolve was steel, unyielding as the truth I'd gathered. By lunchtime, as I pretended to work at my secretary desk, the wheels of justice were grinding, calls buzzing to his phone, his boss summoning him for urgent talks. Auditors would swarm soon, badges flashing, questions sharp as knives. And Brandon had no idea his own mother was behind it, the one who'd raised him, now pulling the strings that would yank him down. He texted me mid-morning. "Weird day at work. Talk later?" I replied with a heart emoji, smiling at my screen. Let him sweat. The storm was just beginning. Brandon called me in panic that afternoon, his voice cracking over the phone like thunder in a storm too close. "Mom, everything's falling apart. Accounts frozen. Boss just suspended me pending review, and some investigators showed up asking questions." He ranted on, words tumbling like rocks down a hill, begging for help. "You gotta call someone, pull strings, tell them it's a mistake." His untouchable tone had vanished, replaced by raw fear, the golden boy sounding like a scared kid again. I sat at my kitchen table, stirring cold coffee, and for once, I said nothing. No reassurances, no plans to fix it. I just listened, letting his pleas echo in the silence on my end. That quiet cut deeper than any words could, sharper than the knives he'd twisted in me with his lies and thefts. He paused, waiting for my rescue, but all he got was dead air. "Mom? You there?" Desperation leaked through like water from a cracked dam. For the first time, he tasted helplessness, the world closing in without his cheats to hold it back. And then came the knock at his door, loud, official, like fate itself demanding entry. Neighbors watched from their porches as Brandon was let out in handcuffs by two stern officers, his expensive suit wrinkled like yesterday's trash, his face pale as milk under the streetlights. His eyes were wide with shock, mouth hanging open like he'd forgotten how to speak. The squad car's lights flashed blue and red across lawns, turning the quiet Ohio street into a crime scene spectacle. He spotted me standing on my porch across the way, arms crossed tight against the chill, and his gaze locked on mine, pleading like the boy who'd skinned his knee years ago, begging for a Band-Aid. "Mom," he mouthed, desperation raw as an open wound. But I didn't move, didn't rush to his side or yell at the cops. I stood steady, finally untouchable myself, watching as they shoved him into the back seat, door slamming like a final punctuation on his schemes. Whispers rippled through the crowd. What did he do? Always knew he was trouble. His empire of lies crumbled in one night. But my lesson wasn't over yet. Jail was just the start of what he'd learn. At trial, I sat quietly in the gallery of the Ohio courthouse, the wooden benches hard under me as lawyers paced like wolves before the judge. The evidence played out like a slow reveal movie, my recordings of his bribes and boasts echoing through speakers, my documents spread on tables like confession cards, my notes detailing every forged loan and hidden transfer. Brandon slumped in his orange jumpsuit, chains clinking soft as he shifted, his eyes scanning the room until they locked on mine. Wide with shock, like a deer caught in headlights, he mouthed, "Mom." As realization dawned, he knew then I'd orchestrated it all. The quiet mom who'd raised him, now the hand pulling his strings. Whispers rippled through spectators, jurors nodding at the proof. His lawyer stammered objections, but the prosecutor hammered home each crime like nails in a coffin. I didn't look away, my gaze steady as stone, no tears, no pity, just truth staring back. He bowed his head, defeated, as closing arguments wrapped. The courtroom buzzed with tension, air thick as fog. But I felt calm, almost serene. The verdict was about to seal his fate, a hammer drop on his untouchable crown. Brandon was sentenced to 5 years behind bars, the judge's gavel cracking like thunder in the packed courtroom, sealing his fall with a single thud. The place buzzed like a hive disturbed, reporters scribbling, family gasping, but I sat still, my hands folded calm in my lap. Embezzlement, fraud, bribery. The judge listed, his voice stern as a father's scold, stacking years like bricks on Brandon's back. He stood there, head down, no more smirks or boasts, just a broken man in chains glancing at me one last time, eyes pleading like the boy who'd once cried over scraped knees. My son had believed he was untouchable, floating above laws and love, but justice and his own mother proved otherwise, yanking him down to earth with cold facts. As guards led him away, shoulders slumped, I whispered to myself, "He'll never forget this," the words tasting like bitter victory on my tongue. The lesson had landed hard, carving humility into his bones where arrogance once ruled. And neither will I forget the pain of raising a monster, then slaying it with truth. Brandon was sentenced to 5 years in that cold Ohio courtroom, the judge's gavel cracking like a final door slam on his freedom. The place buzzed with murmurs, lawyers shuffling papers, reporters jotting notes, family friends whispering shock. But I sat still as stone in the back row, my hands folded tight in my lap. Embezzlement, fraud, bribery. The judge listed again, his voice flat as pavement, stacking time like bricks on my son's shoulders. Brandon stood there in his ill-fitting suit, head bowed low, no more smirks or boasts, just a broken man glancing back at me with eyes pleading like the kid who'd once cried over a lost toy. But I didn't flinch, didn't rush to hug him or beg the judge for mercy. My son had believed he was untouchable, floating above laws like a cloud over dirt, but justice and his own mother proved otherwise, yanking him down with the weight of his own lies. As guards led him away in chains that clinked like broken promises, I whispered to myself, "He'll never forget this," the words tasting like bitter medicine I'd force-fed for his own good. And neither will I. The scar of raising him ran too deep to fade. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like this video, comment, and smash the subscribe button. Also check out other videos on the channel. Feminine Revenge has got more thrilling stories for you.